I never thought I'd be the villain in someone else's success story. But here I am, watching my career crumble while the woman I once called incapable stands in front of millions, holding up the letter that destroyed her life and made mine a living nightmare. Let me take you back 5 years. Back when I was on top of the world, running the most profitable sales division in the entire company. My name was whispered in boardrooms with reverence. Marcus Chun, the man with the Midas touch, the executive who could spot talent and squeeze every last drop of potential from his team. Or so I thought. I had it all. Corner office on the 42nd floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Reserved parking spot right next to the CEO. Invitations to every industry gala, every exclusive networking event, every private dinner where deals worth millions were made over wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. My salary was obscene. My bonus was obscener. I wore Tom Ford suits and Swiss watches that could have fed a family for a year. I dated women who looked like they walked off magazine covers. I drove a car that made other men stare with India red lights. And I loved every second of it. Not because of the material things, though I won't lie and say those didn't matter. I loved it because of what it represented. Power. Success. Validation. I'd grown up as the son of immigrants who worked themselves to the bone, who sacrificed everything so I could have opportunities they never did. Every promotion, every bonus, every recognition was proof that their sacrifices meant something. That I'd made it. That I'd won. My sales division was legendary. 47 people, all killers, all ruthless, all willing to do whatever it took to close deals. We had a saying. ABC. Always be closing. Original, right? But it worked. We moved fast, talked faster, and left competitors wondering what hit them. Our quarterly numbers made other divisions look like charity organizations. The CEO called us his secret weapon. The board pointed to us as the model for the entire company. I ran my team like a military operation. Daily stand-ups at 7 a.m. sharp. Anyone who showed up at 7:01 got called out in front of everyone. Weekly performance reviews, where the bottom 10% got publicly identified. Monthly quota assessments where missing your numbers meant a formal warning. 3 warnings and you were out. No exceptions. No excuses. No mercy. People called me demanding. Intense. Difficult. I called it excellence. I called it accountability. I called it what separated winners from losers in a competitive market. Before Sarah, I'd fired 12 people in 3 years. 12 people who couldn't cut it, who made excuses, who wanted participation trophies for showing up. I remember their faces sometimes, late at night when sleep won't come. Jennifer, who cried during her termination meeting because she had 2 kids and a mortgage. I told her she should have thought about that before failing to meet her quota. Marcus number 2, a young black kid from the South Side who reminded me of myself at that age. He asked for more training, more mentorship. I told him champions don't need hand-holding. Linda, who was 6 months pregnant and requested a slightly reduced workload. I told her pregnancy wasn't a disability, and this wasn't a daycare. I didn't lose sleep over any of them back then. They were casualties of war. Collateral damage in the pursuit of excellence. Besides, I told myself, I was doing them a favor. Teaching them that the real world doesn't coddle you. Doesn't care about your feelings or your circumstances. The market doesn't care if you're tired or stressed or overwhelmed. It only cares about results. That was my philosophy. That was my empire. And it was working beautifully. Then Sarah Mitchell walked into my office for her interview. It was a Tuesday in March. I remember because I'd just closed the biggest deal of the quarter that morning and was riding high on adrenaline and victory. I almost canceled the interview, but my assistant had already confirmed it 3 times, and HR was on my back about filling the open position. Sarah was 28, dressed in a conservative navy suit that looked like it came from Macy's instead of Neiman Marcus. Her shoes were practical, not impressive. Her jewelry was minimal. She carried a leather portfolio that had seen better days. Everything about her presentation screamed middle class, trying to look professional. Not the polished, hungry look I preferred in my team. But her resume was solid. 3 years at a smaller firm, decent numbers, positive references. Nothing spectacular, but decent. I needed bodies to handle the pipeline we were building, so I went through with the interview. "Tell me why you want to work here," I started, leaning back in my leather chair. "I've followed your division's success," she said, making direct eye contact. "Your numbers are impressive. But I noticed something interesting in the industry reports. Your client retention after the first year is below industry average. Your referral rates are even lower. I think there's an opportunity to not just close deals, but build relationships that generate compound value." I should have been impressed by her analysis. Instead, I was irritated. She was critiquing my success before she'd even earned the right to be in the room. "Our model is about volume and velocity," I said. "We close fast and move on. Retention is someone else's problem. My job is to hunt, not farm." "But sir, studies show that acquiring a new customer costs 5 to 7 times more than retaining an existing one. What if we could do both? Close deals quickly and build foundations for long-term partnerships?" "Studies," I said, with what I thought was a charming smile, but was probably a condescending smirk. "I've got 15 years of real-world experience that beats any academic study. Let me ask you something, Sarah. When you're in the ring with a competitor, fighting for a deal, do you think the client cares about your long-term vision? Or do they want someone who can solve their problem right now?" "I think they want both," she said. "And I think the salespeople who can deliver both are the ones who build careers, not just commission checks." I hired her. Not because I agreed with her, but because I thought I could mold her, break down her idealistic notions, and rebuild her into a proper sales warrior. I'd done it before with other soft recruits. I could do it again. Sarah started on a Monday in April. I assigned her to the team's toughest mentor, Brad, a guy who embodied everything I valued. Aggressive, relentless, shameless. Brad could sell ice to Eskimos and make them thank him for the privilege. He'd been my top performer 3 years running. "Break her in," I told Brad. "She's got some college ideas about relationship selling. Show her how we actually do it." Brad grinned. "Consider it done, boss." The first week, Sarah shadowed Brad on calls. I'd check in with him every evening. "How's the new girl?" "Too soft," Brad would say. "She keeps asking clients about their personal lives, their company culture, their long-term goals. I keep telling her we're not therapists. We're salespeople. Give her time. She'll learn." But she didn't learn. Not the way I wanted her to. Over the next 3 months, I watched Sarah operate in a way that went against everything I'd built. While my other salespeople were making 20 cold calls an hour, rapid-fire pitches designed to overwhelm and close, Sarah was making 5 calls. 5. And spending an hour on each one. I'd listen in sometimes, standing behind her cubicle where she couldn't see me, hearing her conversations. "Tell me about your current challenges," she'd say. "What keeps you up at night? What would success look like for you? How do you measure value in your organization?" Questions. So many questions. She'd take notes by hand, filling up legal pads with observations. Then she'd research the client's industry, their competitors, their market position. She'd customize presentations instead of using our proven decks. She'd follow up with personalized emails that referenced specific points from their conversations. It was exhausting just watching her. And inefficient. painfully inefficient. Her numbers reflected it. After 3 months, she was in the bottom third of the team. Not failing, but not winning. Just existing in mediocrity. That was unacceptable. In my division, you were either a predator or prey. Sarah was acting like neither. I called her into my office on a Tuesday afternoon in July. The air conditioning was running high, making the room almost uncomfortably cold. I liked it that way. Kept people alert on edge. "Sarah," I said, sliding a spreadsheet across my mahogany desk. "We need to talk about your performance." She sat down, that same eager smile on her face. God, that smile irritated me. Like she knew something I didn't. Like she was humoring me instead of being evaluated by me. "Your numbers are slipping," I continued. "You're in the bottom third of the team. That's not acceptable." "Mr. Chin," she said, leaning forward, her voice calm and measured. "I know my immediate numbers aren't the highest, but I'm building something sustainable. The clients I'm working with, they're not one-time deals. They're partnerships. Give me 6 months, and I'll show you the retention rates and the referral pipelines and—" I cut her off with a laugh. Actually laughed in her face. I can still hear that sound sometimes. Sharp, dismissive, cruel. "Retention rates? Sarah, this isn't a charity. We're not here to make friends. We're here to close deals and move on to the next one. That's how winners operate. That's how I built this division into what it is. But sir, the data shows that long-term relationships result in higher lifetime value and referrals that—" "The data?" I cut her off again. "I've been in this business for 15 years. I know what works. Speed, volume, pressure. That's the formula. Not whatever touchy-feely approach you learned in some community college seminar." Her smile faded. Just a bit. Just enough for me to notice and feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. "I graduated from Northwestern with a degree in psychology and business. Then maybe you should have paid more attention in the business classes," I said. "Look, Sarah, I'm going to be direct with you because I believe in honesty. You're not cut out for this level of sales. You're too soft, too slow, too concerned with being liked. This is a battlefield, and you're showing up with flowers." I watched her absorb the words. Watched her fight to maintain her composure. It reminded me of my father when his boss at the factory would dress him down. That same forced dignity in the face of humiliation. "I'll improve," she said quietly. "You have 30 days. I told her. 30 days to prove you can operate like the rest of my killers. 30 days to show me you belong here. Or you're out." She nodded and left. I remember feeling good about that conversation. Tough love, I told myself. Sometimes people need a wake-up call. Sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. Over the next 30 days, I watched Sarah try to become something she wasn't. She made more calls, shortened her conversations, used the scripts we'd perfected. She stopped asking so many questions. She pushed for closes faster. She became a pale imitation of Brad and the others. Her numbers went up. Slightly. But you could see the life draining out of her. She looked tired. Stressed. Miserable. Good, I thought. That's what growth feels like. Discomfort. Pressure. Pain. But it wasn't enough. Not for me. Because here's the truth I've never admitted to anyone until now. I didn't just think Sarah was underperforming. I resented her. Deep down, in a place I didn't want to examine, I resented everything she represented. I resented the way clients seemed to genuinely like her. When I'd call to check in on her accounts, they'd say things like, "Sarah really gets us," or, "She's different from other salespeople." That irritated me. I wanted them to respect me, fear me, admire my division's prowess. I didn't want them to like some junior rep more than they respected me. I resented how the younger team members would ask her for advice during lunch breaks. I'd see them clustered around her desk, laughing at something she said, taking notes as she explained some technique. I was the leader. I was the one they should be learning from, not her. I resented that she challenged my methods, even politely, even respectfully. In my kingdom, I was supposed to be the only voice that mattered, the only vision that counted. Her very presence was a subtle but constant challenge to everything I'd built. And maybe, somewhere even deeper, I resented that she reminded me of something I'd lost. Some version of myself that cared about people, not just profits. Some part of me that my father would have been proud of, before I became the kind of man who measured worth in commission checks and corner offices. But I didn't acknowledge any of that. I just knew I wanted her gone. When 30 days passed, I called her in again. This time, I had HR present. Janet from Human Resources, a middle-aged woman who'd rubber-stamped every decision I'd ever made. She was there as a formality, a witness, a legal protection for the company. "Sarah, we've reviewed your performance over the evaluation period, and we've made a decision." I began, my voice flat and businesslike. "We're letting you go. Effective immediately." The color drained from her face. Literally drained. I watched her go from healthy to pale in seconds. "But Mr. Chen, my numbers went up. I did everything you asked. I changed my entire approach. It's not just about numbers," I said, lying through my teeth. "It's about cultural fit. You don't fit our culture of excellence. You're simply incapable of performing at the level we require." There it was. That word. Incapable. I'd chosen it carefully when I wrote the termination letter that morning. Incapable was definitive. Final. It wasn't, hasn't yet achieved, or needs development. It was a judgment on her fundamental ability, her core competence, her worth. I watched it land like a physical blow. I watched her eyes well up with tears she fought desperately to hold back. I watched her hands grip the arms of the chair until her knuckles went white. "I'd like to know specifically what metrics I failed to meet," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't a negotiation," I replied. "Janet will walk you through the paperwork. We'll provide 2 weeks severance as a courtesy. I suggest you consider a different career path, Sarah. Something less demanding. Maybe teaching, or customer service, or nonprofit work. Sales at this level clearly isn't your calling. Some people just aren't built for high-pressure environments." I'll never forget the way she looked at me in that moment. Not with anger, which I expected. Not with tears, which I was prepared for. But with something else. Disappointment. Deep, profound disappointment. Like she'd expected more from me. Like I was a child who'd failed to understand a simple but important lesson. "May I have a copy of the termination letter?" she asked. "Of course," I said, sliding an envelope across the desk. I'd written it myself that morning on company letterhead, choosing every word deliberately. "Sarah Mitchell's employment is terminated effective immediately due to consistent underperformance and inability to meet the standards required for this position. Despite coaching and additional support, Ms. Mitchell has proven incapable of executing the fundamental skills necessary for success in our organization. We wish her well in her future endeavors in a field better suited to her capabilities." She took the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in her worn leather bag. Then she did something I didn't expect. She stood, extended her hand, and looked me directly in the eye. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chen. I learned a lot here. More than you probably intended to teach me." She shook my hand firmly, shook Janet's hand, and walked out. Her back was straight. Her head was high. She didn't cry, didn't plead, didn't make a scene. She just left with more dignity than I'd given her any reason to maintain. I remember feeling satisfied. victorious even. I'd cut the dead weight. I'd maintained my standards. I'd sent a message to the rest of the team: perform or perish. Adapt or die. This is not a place for weakness. Brad came by my office an hour later. "Heard you fired Mitchell." "Wasn't cutting it," I said. "Good call. She was dragging down the team average anyway. You want me to start interviewing replacements?" "Already on it. I want someone hungry. Someone who gets what we're about." 2 weeks later, I hired Derek to replace her. Derek was 26, Columbia MBA, expensive suit, aggressive handshake, talked a big game about disruption and aggressive market penetration. He used words like dominate and crush and destroy the competition. He fit my culture perfectly. Within 6 months, Derek was my second highest performer. See? I told myself. This is what happens when you hire right. When you don't settle for soft skills and relationship building. When you find killers. Life moved on. My division continued to crush quotas. We beat our annual target by 38%. I got promoted to vice president of sales, overseeing 3 divisions now, not just one. My salary jumped another 20%. I bought a bigger house in a better neighborhood. Started dating Amanda, a former Miss California contestant who was trying to break into acting. Life was good. No, life was great. Sarah Mitchell became a footnote, a cautionary tale I'd occasionally share with new hires over drinks. "I once had a salesperson who thought being nice was a strategy," I'd say, always getting laughs. She didn't last long. "You can't hug your way to a quota." I didn't think about her for months, then years. Why would I? I was climbing, soaring, building an empire that spanned multiple divisions now. My face was in industry magazines. I spoke at conferences. I was asked to contribute to a book about modern sales leadership. Everything I touched turned to gold. Until it didn't. The first crack appeared about 2 years after I'd fired Sarah. My retention numbers, the ones she'd warned me about, started becoming a problem. Clients weren't renewing contracts at the rate they used to. Our customer lifetime value was dropping. We were having to spend more and more on acquisition to maintain growth. My CEO called me in. "Marcus, we need to talk about churn." "Sir? We're losing too many clients after the first contract. They're going to competitors who offer more attentive service, better ongoing support. Our acquisition costs are eating into margins. What's the plan?" I blamed the market. Blamed increased competition. Blamed client fickleness. Blamed everything except my own model. "We'll increase acquisition efforts to compensate," I said. "Hunt harder. Close more." "That's not sustainable, Marcus. It's worked for 15 years. The market's changing. Clients want partnerships, not transactions." Partnerships. That word again. The word Sarah had used. But I pushed the thought away. Then, 3 years after I'd fired her, I started hearing whispers. Rumors at industry events. There was a new player making waves. A boutique consultancy that was stealing clients from established firms with unprecedented retention rates and referral networks. They weren't the biggest, but they were growing fast. Really fast. Exponentially fast. Their client testimonials were different too. Not about speed or aggression or closing power. About trust. About understanding. About feeling valued. All the soft stuff I dismissed as irrelevant. The founder was some woman nobody had heard of. But she was writing articles, speaking at smaller conferences, building a reputation as someone who'd cracked the code on sustainable B2B relationships. I didn't connect the dots. Why would I? There were probably thousands of consultancies out there trying new approaches. Most would fail. The market would correct itself. Aggression and volume would win in the end, like it always did. Another year passed. Year 4 since the firing. I was at an industry conference in Vegas, networking at a cocktail party on a rooftop with a view of the Strip. The air was warm, the drinks were flowing, and I was in my element. Working the room, making connections, closing deals before they were even officially proposed. I overheard two executives talking near the bar. Both were from Fortune 500 companies. Both were potential clients. "You need to meet Sarah Mitchell from Apex Solutions," one was saying. "She completely revolutionized how we think about B2B relationships. Her model is generating 3 times the lifetime value of our traditional sales approaches." I froze, glass of scotch halfway to my lips. "What's her secret?" the other executive asked. "It's not rocket science. She just treats business relationships like actual relationships. Invests time in understanding needs. Builds trust. Follows through. Stays engaged after the close. Revolutionary, right?" He laughed. "It's insane that this is considered innovative. But compared to the typical shark mentality most sales teams have, it's like she's from another planet." "What's her background?" "Doesn't talk about it much. I heard she came from corporate sales. Got fired for not being aggressive enough." More laughter. "Best thing that ever happened to her, apparently. Pushed her to build something better." Sarah Mitchell. My Sarah Mitchell. The name ricocheted through my brain like a bullet. "Her company did $50 million last year," the first executive continued. "Started from nothing. All organic growth, all client referrals. No cold calling, no pressure tactics. Just solid relationship building and exceptional value delivery. She's presenting tomorrow morning. You should come." My blood went cold. My hand started shaking. I set the scotch down before I dropped it. I went back to my hotel room and Googled Sarah Mitchell, Apex Solutions. And there she was. My Sarah. Except she wasn't my Sarah anymore. She was polished, confident, successful. Her company website showed a team of 30 people. Client testimonials from major corporations. Case studies showing dramatic improvements in retention and lifetime value. Articles she'd published in Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Fast Company. Speaking engagements at major conferences. She'd built everything I'd told her was impossible, using exactly the methods I'd mocked. I felt something unfamiliar in my chest. Not quite fear, but close. Unease. Dread. The feeling you get when you realize you've made a catastrophic error in judgment, but it's too late to fix it. I told myself it was a fluke. She'd gotten lucky. Caught a wave. Found a niche. It wouldn't last. Markets correct. Fundamentals win. Aggression and volume would prevail. But it did last. It grew. Over the next year, I watched from a distance as Sarah's star continued to rise. She closed a deal with Microsoft. Then Amazon. Then 3 of our biggest clients switched to her firm. Just left us for her boutique consultancy that didn't even have a corner office tower or a sales floor full of killers. When I'd call to ask why they were leaving, they'd say things like, "We want a partner who understands our business," or "We're looking for long-term value, not just transactions," or worse, "We want to work with someone who actually cares." My CEO called me in again. This time his tone was different. Sharper. Less patient. "Marcus, we need to talk about client retention." "Again?" "Sir? We're hemorrhaging clients to this Apex Solutions firm. They're a fraction of our size, but they're taking our best accounts. What are they offering that we're not?" I knew exactly what they were offering. They were offering Sarah's method. The one I'd called touchy-feely nonsense. The one I'd fired her for using. "I'll look into it." "You do that. Because the board is asking questions. Hard questions. About why our client lifetime value keeps dropping while our acquisition costs keep rising. About why smaller firms are eating our lunch. About whether our sales model is outdated. That word. Outdated. The same way I'd called Sarah's approach outdated, old-fashioned, naive. I tried to adapt. God, I really tried. I started pushing my team toward longer-term client relationships. I introduced training on consultative selling. I brought in coaches to teach empathy and active listening. But it all felt forced, artificial, performative. We'd built our entire culture on speed and volume and pressure. You can't just flip a switch and become something else. The foundation was wrong. The DNA was corrupted. And my team knew it. They could sense the panic, the uncertainty, the fear. Brad came to me one day and said, "Boss, what's going on? You're telling us to slow down and build relationships, but our quotas haven't changed. You're sending mixed messages. Just do what I'm telling you." I snapped. "But it doesn't work. The relationship stuff takes time, and we don't have time. We have monthly numbers to hit." He was right. I'd built a system that rewarded short-term wins, and now I was trying to retrofit it for long-term value. It was like trying to turn a speedboat into a cruise ship while it was still racing. More clients left. Our revenue started to flatten, then decline, then plummet. The board started asking harder questions. My boss started looking at me differently. Not with respect and admiration, but with doubt, with concern, with the look you give someone who's lost their touch. "Maybe we need fresh blood in leadership," he said during one particularly brutal quarterly review. "Someone who understands modern sales methodology. Someone who gets where the market is heading, not where it used to be." That's when the real panic set in. The empire I'd built was crumbling, and the worst part was I was losing it to someone I'd called incapable. Someone I dismissed. Someone I destroyed while feeling righteous about it. I became obsessed. I'd check Sarah's company website daily. Read every article she published. Watch every interview she gave on YouTube. Join webinars where she was speaking just to hear her voice, her ideas, her methods. She never mentioned me directly, never referenced being fired, never made it personal. She just kept rising, kept growing, kept proving that everything I'd believed was wrong. Her company hit 60 million. Then 70. Then 80. She opened offices in 3 cities. She started a foundation helping women who'd faced discrimination in corporate America. She was profiled in Fortune. Incorporated magazine named her company one of the fastest-growing private companies in America. And through it all, she was gracious, humble, generous with her knowledge. She published her methods openly, wrote detailed case studies, spoke for free at universities. She wasn't building an empire of secrecy and aggressive competitiveness like I had. She was building a movement of better business practices. That's what killed me most. She wasn't just beating me. She was being better than me in every way that mattered. My life started falling apart in other ways too. Amanda, my girlfriend, left me for a tech entrepreneur who actually had time for her and treated her like a human being instead of arm candy. "You're always working, always stressed, always angry," she said on her way out. "You're becoming bitter, Marcus. It's not attractive." My health deteriorated. High blood pressure, anxiety, insomnia. I'd lie awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Sarah's success and my failures, wondering where I'd gone wrong, wondering if I'd ever been right. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Patricia Martinez, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and zero tolerance for bullshit. "Tell me what brings you here," she said in our first session. I told her everything. The empire I'd built. The people I'd fired. Sarah. The letter. The word incapable. Watching her succeed while I failed. "You're grieving," she said. Grieving what? Your identity. You built your entire sense of self on being the best, the smartest, the most successful. Now that foundation is cracking, and you don't know who you are without it. So what do? You rebuild. But this time, you build on truth instead of ego. On values instead of victories. On who you want to become instead of who you've been. It sounded good in theory. In practice, it was excruciating. Then came last month. 5 years to the day after I'd fired Sarah. I was at home, alone in my big empty house that suddenly felt like a mausoleum of my arrogance. I was flipping through channels after another exhausting day of trying to stop the bleeding in my division. Our numbers were down 40% year over year. The board was talking about restructuring. My job was on the line. I landed on a major news network doing a special segment on women in business who'd overcome adversity. And there she was, Sarah Mitchell, sitting across from a nationally renowned interviewer in a studio that looked warm and inviting. She was wearing a professional but not corporate outfit. She looked confident, comfortable, real. Sarah, you built an incredible company for nothing, the interviewer said. Apex Solutions generated over $50 million in sales last year. What motivated you to start this company? Sarah smiled. That same smile I'd found so irritating 5 years ago. Except now it looked knowing, wise, almost amused by the journey. I got fired from my previous job. My heart stopped. My entire body went rigid. I couldn't breathe. My boss told me I was incapable of success in sales, she continued, her voice steady and clear. He said I should consider teaching or customer service. Something less demanding. Something more suited to my limited capabilities. The interviewer leaned forward, engaged. That must have been devastating. It was, Sarah nodded. For about 48 hours, I believed him. I questioned everything I had learned, everything I believed about business and relationships and value creation. I actually researched teaching certification programs. I looked into nonprofit jobs. I thought maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for high-level sales. Maybe I was incapable. What changed? I was cleaning out my bag 2 days after being fired, and I found the termination letter. I read it again. Really read it. Every word. Every phrase. And I realized something profound. He didn't fire me because I was bad at sales. He fired me because I was doing it differently than he wanted. And his way, while profitable in the short term, was leaving a trail of burned clients and damaged relationships. His way was optimized for his quarterly bonuses, not for actual value creation. So you decided to prove him wrong? Not exactly. I decided to prove myself right. There's a difference. If I'd been focused on proving him wrong, I would have been building my company in reaction to his criticism. Instead, I built it according to my values. I took every principle he told me was wrong, every method he mocked, every approach he called soft and naive, and I built a business on those foundations. Tell us about that process. I started small. I reached out to former clients I'd built relationships with at my old job. Not to sell them anything, but to ask for their honest feedback. What had they valued about working with me? What had they wished was different? What did they need that they weren't getting from traditional sales relationships? And what did they tell you? They told me they were tired of being sold to. Tired of aggressive tactics. Tired of salespeople who disappeared after the contract was signed. They wanted partners, not vendors. They wanted someone who understood their business, who invested time in their success, who treated them like humans instead of commission sources. So that became your model? That became my foundation. I focused on the clients everyone else ignored because they weren't quick wins. I invested time in understanding their actual needs instead of pushing products. I built relationships instead of transactions. I stayed engaged after the close. I asked for feedback. I treated business like what it actually is, relationships between human beings trying to solve problems together. And clearly, it worked. 50 million in sales last year. The number hit me like a physical blow. 50 million. The woman I'd called incapable had built a company generating 50 million in annual sales, using the exact methods I'd told her were worthless. Using the approach I'd fired her for. Sarah, you mentioned the termination letter. Do you still have it? She smiled wider. I do, actually. I keep it framed in my office, right above my desk where I can see it every day. Can we see it? Even better, Sarah said. I brought it with me. No. No, 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 no. She reached into her leather bag, a much nicer one than she'd carried 5 years ago, and pulled out a familiar envelope. My envelope. The one I had slid across my desk so confidently, so casually, not realizing I was handing her the weapon that would eventually destroy me. She unfolded the letter carefully, almost reverently. Then she held it up to the camera. The camera zoomed in. My words, in my handwriting on company letterhead, filled the screen. Sarah Mitchell's employment is terminated effective immediately due to consistent underperformance and inability to meet the standards required for this position. She read aloud to millions of viewers. Despite coaching and additional support, Ms. Mitchell has proven incapable of executing the fundamental skills necessary for success in our organization. She looked up at the camera, and I swear she was looking directly at me through my television screen, through time and space, right into my soul. This was written by Marcus Chen, Vice President of Sales at Tech Dynamics Corporation. She said, her voice clear and strong. She said my name. On national television. Attached to that letter. Attached to the word incapable. Attached to every cruel, dismissive, arrogant thing I'd ever done. My phone exploded. Text messages, emails, calls, notifications. Everyone had seen it. My boss, my colleagues, my former girlfriend, my college roommate, my father, my mother, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone. The messages were all variations of the same thing. Is this you? Did you really fire her? Did you call her incapable? Have you seen this? I couldn't respond. I couldn't move. I just sat there, watching the interview continue, watching my life disintegrate in real time. The interviewer pressed on. How do you feel reading that letter now? Grateful, Sarah said without hesitation. Deeply, profoundly grateful. Because Marcus Chen did me the biggest favor of my life. He freed me from trying to fit into a system that was fundamentally broken. He freed me to build something authentic. Something that works not because it's aggressive or fast, but because it's human. He thought calling me incapable would break me. Instead, it became my fuel. Every time I doubted myself, every time I wondered if I should give up, I'd look at that letter and think, I'm going to prove that incapable is just one person's limited judgment, not an objective truth. Have you spoken to him since? No. I haven't needed to. This letter says everything. It's a perfect encapsulation of a leadership philosophy that prioritizes short-term metrics over long-term value, that confuses aggression with effectiveness, that mistakes conformity for competence. He built a system that maximized his quarterly bonuses at the expense of sustainable client relationships. I built the opposite. The market decided which approach was actually valuable. What would you say to him if he were watching? She looked directly into the camera again. I felt like she could see me, sitting in my living room, watching my world end. Thank you, Mr. Chen. Thank you for underestimating me. Thank you for teaching me exactly what not to do. Thank you for being so confident in your wrongness that you put it in writing. Thank you for giving me the motivation to prove that being called incapable by the wrong person is actually the highest compliment. Thank you for being the villain that every success story needs. Because without you dismissing me, I might have stayed. I might have eventually conformed. I might have become just another cog in your broken machine. Instead, you gave me the gift of necessity. You forced me to bet on myself. And I won. The segment ended, but my nightmare was just beginning. Within an hour, the clip had 1 million views on YouTube. By morning, 10 million. News outlets were picking it up. Business websites were writing think pieces about toxic sales culture and leadership failures. LinkedIn was on fire with people sharing the story, commenting on their own experiences with bad bosses, celebrating Sarah's success and my downfall. Someone created a meme with my face and the word incapable in huge letters. It went viral. Absolutely viral. Millions of shares. I was a punchline. A cautionary tale. A symbol of everything wrong with corporate America. My boss called me at 6 in the morning. Marcus, we need you to come in immediately. Don't talk to anyone. Don't post anything online. Just get here. I knew what was coming. I'd been on the other side of this conversation too many times not to recognize it. The meeting was short. Brutally short. My boss, the CEO, the head of HR, and a lawyer I'd never met. Janet had retired the year before, replaced by a younger HR director who actually seemed to care about employee treatment. Marcus, in light of recent events and the overwhelmingly negative attention your management style has brought to the company, we've decided to terminate your employment. Effective immediately. You're firing me over something I did 5 years ago? We're firing you because you represent everything wrong with outdated sales culture. Our clients are calling asking if we treat all our employees like you treated Ms. Mitchell. Our board is deeply concerned about our values and culture. Our employees are questioning whether this is the kind of company they want to work for. You've become a liability. A significant liability. This is unfair. I built this division. I generated hundreds of millions in revenue over 15 years and burned through dozens of talented people to do it. How many Sarah Mitchells did we lose because of your approach? How many future $50 million success stories walked out our door because you couldn't see past your own ego? How many people did you call incapable who went on to succeed elsewhere? The question hung in the air. I didn't have an answer. I'd never thought about it that way. We'll provide 4 weeks severance, the CEO said, as a courtesy. 4 weeks. I'd given Sarah 2 and called it generous. You're also required to sign an NDA prohibiting you from disparaging the company or discussing your termination publicly. If you violate this, we'll pursue legal action. They slid papers across the table. The same table where I'd sat in triumph so many times, making decisions about other people's lives and careers. Now it was my turn. I signed. What choice did I have? I cleaned up my office in 30 minutes. No one came to say goodbye. No one shook my hand or wished me well. The people I'd worked with for years, people whose careers I'd supposedly built, avoided eye contact as I walked past carrying a box of personal items. Brad, my former top performer, actually turned his back when he saw me coming. I was toxic. Contagious. A reminder of a culture everyone was suddenly embarrassed to have participated in. The aftermath was worse than the firing. My reputation was destroyed. Completely, utterly destroyed. Every job interview started with the same question. Are you the Marcus Chen from that Sarah Mitchell story? Yes. Yes, I am. I'm the villain. I'm the bad example. I'm the cautionary tale. Articles were written analyzing my leadership style, my methods, my philosophy. Business schools added my case to their curricula as an example of how not to manage people. Harvard Business Review published a piece titled, The Marcus Chen Syndrome, When winning culture becomes toxic culture. I was famous. Just not the way I'd always imagined. I tried to rebuild. I really did. I started a consulting practice, offering to help companies modernize their sales approaches. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, including me. The man who'd embodied aggressive old-school sales tactics now claiming he could teach modern relationship-based selling. Nobody bought it. Nobody trusted it. Nobody wanted to be associated with me. I reached out to former colleagues for referrals. Most didn't respond. The ones who did were polite but distant. Now is not a good time. We're going in a different direction. I'll keep you in mind if anything comes up. All the same phrases I'd heard 1,000 times in sales. All meaning the same thing. No. I went to industry conferences and felt people avoid me. Literally changed direction when they saw me approaching. I was a pariah. A cautionary tale that nobody wanted to stand too close to. My finances deteriorated. I'd been living beyond my means for years, assuming the money would always flow. Now it wasn't. I had to sell the big house, sell the expensive car, move to a modest apartment in a neighborhood I would have scoffed at 5 years ago. My father called me one night. "Marcus, what happened?" "I'm seeing your name in the news." I told him everything. The whole story. When I finished, there was a long silence. "You treated people like machines," he finally said. "Like tools. Your mother and I, we worked for men like you. Men who saw us as labor, not as human beings. We sacrificed everything so you could be better than that. And instead, you became exactly that." The disappointment in his voice was worse than any professional failure. Meanwhile, Sarah kept rising. Her company hit 75 million, then 90 million. She made the Forbes list of most innovative companies. She won awards for ethical business practices. She started a foundation helping women in business who'd faced discrimination or been told they weren't good enough. She wrote a book called Incapable, Turning Your Biggest Insult into Your Greatest Asset. The cover featured my letter, the word incapable highlighted in bold. It became an instant bestseller. Of course it did. I bought the book. Read it cover to cover in one sitting in my small apartment, drinking cheap whiskey because I couldn't afford the good stuff anymore. Every page was a mirror held up to my worst self. Every chapter detailed the consequences of my arrogance, my cruelty, my fundamental misunderstanding of what leadership meant. She interviewed my other former employees. Jennifer, the woman with 2 kids I'd fired. Marcus number 2, the kid from the South Side. Linda, who'd been pregnant. All the casualties of my march toward excellence. All the people I'd dismissed as weak or incapable or not cut out for it. All of them had gone on to succeed elsewhere. All of them told stories of how my rejection had forced them to find better environments, better leaders, better versions of themselves. I wasn't just wrong about Sarah. I was wrong about everyone. One passage in her book haunted me more than any other. Marcus Chin believed that pressure creates diamonds. He wasn't entirely wrong. Pressure can create diamonds. It can also create dust. The difference lies in understanding what you're working with and applying the right kind of pressure in the right way. He treated everyone like coal that needed crushing. He never considered that some of us were already diamonds, just needing the right conditions to shine. His one-size-fits-all approach to leadership wasn't strength. It was laziness disguised as decisiveness. It was fear disguised as confidence. It was insecurity disguised as authority. I read that paragraph 100 times. 1,000 times. Because she was absolutely right. I had been lazy. I'd found a formula that worked for me and assumed it should work for everyone. I'd value conformity over creativity, obedience over innovation, my way over any way. I'd built my empire on a foundation of fear and intimidation. And empires built on fear eventually crumble when people find alternatives. Now I'm 48 years old, working as a mid-level sales manager at a regional firm that hired me only because they were desperate, and I was willing to work for a fraction of my former salary. I train new salespeople, teaching them the modern, relationship-based approaches that Sarah pioneered. The approaches I once mocked. The approaches that would have saved my career if I had had the humility to learn them instead of dismissing them. Sometimes, during training sessions, someone recognizes my name. There's always that moment of awkward silence when they realize who I am. The Marcus Chin. The incapable guy. The villain from Sarah Mitchell's success story. Some don't say anything else. They just know. Others ask me what I learned. What I'd do differently. How I changed. What I tell them is this. I learned that being right about how to do something doesn't mean you're right about how everyone should do it. I learned that my way worked for me in my time, but wasn't the only way, or even the best way. I learned that leadership isn't about creating copies of yourself. It's about helping people become the best versions of themselves. I learned that words matter. That casual cruelty, even when you think it's just business, has real consequences. Not just for the person you're cruel to, but for you. Karma is real. It just takes longer than you think. Most of all, I learned that calling someone incapable says more about your limitations than theirs. It says you can't see beyond your own narrow definition of success. It says you lack the imagination to envision different paths to the same destination. It says you're too insecure to be challenged, too rigid to adapt, too arrogant to learn. Last month, I did something I'd been putting off for 5 years. I wrote Sarah a letter. Not an email. A real letter on real paper, like the one I'd given her. I spent weeks drafting it, revising it, trying to find words that weren't hollow or self-serving. I didn't apologize. Apologies at this point would be meaningless. Self-indulgent. Another way of making her story about me. Instead, I thanked her. I thanked her for proving me wrong. For building something better. For showing that success doesn't require cruelty. For being stronger than I was capable of being. I told her that I frame her book cover in my office now, right next to the modest desk at my modest job. That I look at the word incapable every day to remind myself that my judgment is fallible. That underestimating people says more about my sight than their ability. I told her that I hope my story, humiliating as it is, helps other leaders avoid my mistakes. That if my very public failure prevents even one person from being treated the way I treated her, then maybe the destruction of my career was worth something. I told her I understood why she'd exposed the letter on television. That she wasn't being vindictive. She was being educational. She was using me as an example, a data point, a case study in what happens when ego supersedes empathy. I didn't expect a response. I didn't deserve one. But 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived at my apartment. Plain, simple, professional. Inside was a short note on Apex Solutions letterhead. Mr. Chen, thank you for your letter. I appreciate your reflection and the courage it took to write it. I hope you found the same growth through failure that I did. The difference is, you chose your failure through arrogance. I had mine chosen for me through your judgment. Both taught us lessons, just different ones. Mine made me stronger and more compassionate. I hope yours made you kinder and more humble. Incapable is just a word. What matters is what you do after someone uses it to define you. You used it to dismiss me and close a door. I used it to drive me and open new doors. That difference defined our trajectories. I genuinely wish you well in whatever you build next. Just remember, people aren't obstacles to your success. They're not tools to be used and discarded. They're the foundation, the purpose, and the measure of real success. Leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about making everyone in the room smarter better, more capable. That's a lesson you taught me by being its opposite. Best regards, Sarah Mitchell, CO, Apex Solutions. I keep that note next to her book. It sits on my desk where I can see it every day. It's the kindest thing anyone said to me in 5 years. And the most devastating. Because she's right. About all of it. I don't know if I'll ever rebuild what I lost. Probably not. $50 million success stories don't happen twice in one lifetime. Especially not when you're starting from the reputation I have now. The shadow I cast is too long, too dark, too permanent. But I do know this. Every person I train, every salesperson I mentor, every piece of advice I give, I think about Sarah Mitchell. I think about what I could have learned from her if I'd just listened. If I'd just been humble enough to consider that my way wasn't the only way. If I'd just had the wisdom to see that different doesn't mean wrong. People ask me if I'm bitter. If I resent her success. How could I? She earned every dollar, every accolade, every success by doing exactly what I told her was impossible. She proved that being human in business isn't weakness. It's the ultimate competitive advantage. It's what people remember. It's what they trust. It's what they return to and refer others to. No, I'm not bitter. I'm a cautionary tale. I'm the villain origin story in someone else's hero's journey. I'm the example held up in business schools of everything a leader shouldn't be. I'm the asterisk in Sarah Mitchell's incredible success story. I'm the person who gave her the fuel she needed to build something extraordinary by telling her she wasn't capable of anything. And the worst part? The absolutely crushing, soul-destroying worst part? I was good at what I did. I was really, really good. I generated results. I built systems. I drove revenue. I exceeded targets. I won awards. I climbed the ladder. But I did it at such a human cost that when the reckoning came, nobody stood up for me. Nobody defended me. Nobody said, "But he was a good guy deep down." Nobody said, "But he meant well." Nobody said, "But he got results." Because results without humanity don't matter in the end. Because success built on the backs of broken people isn't success. It's exploitation. Because being good at your job doesn't make you a good leader if you're terrible to the people you lead. Sarah didn't expose me. She didn't reveal some hidden scandal or uncover secret wrongdoing. She simply showed people who I already was. She held up my own words, written in my own hand with my own confidence, and let them speak for themselves. That letter, the one I wrote so casually one Tuesday morning, thinking it was just another piece of corporate bureaucracy, became the defining document of my professional life. Not my sales records. Not my promotions. Not my deals. Not my awards. That letter. Those words. Incapable. I fired Sarah Mitchell because I thought she was incapable. 5 years later, she showed the world that I was the incapable one. Incapable of seeing talent that didn't look like mine. Incapable of imagining approaches that didn't match my own. Incapable of leadership that wasn't rooted in dominance and control. Incapable of change when change was necessary. Incapable of humility when humility would have saved me. She was never the problem. I was. I was always the problem. And now everyone knows it. That's my story. That's how I became the villain in someone else's triumph. That's how one word, one letter, one moment of casual cruelty came back to define everything I am and everything I'll never be again. Sarah Mitchell took the worst thing I ever said about her and turned it into $50 million, a best-selling book, a movement for better business practices, and a legacy that will outlast both of us. I took everything I built and destroyed it with my own arrogance, my own cruelty, my own inability to see people as people instead of metrics. So when people ask me what I learned, I tell them this: you can be right about something and still be wrong about everything. You can win every battle and still lose the war. You can fire someone for being incapable only to discover, years later, watching your world collapse on national television, that you were describing yourself the entire time. The world moved on. Sarah's company hit $100 million in sales this year. She opened international offices. She launched a podcast about ethical leadership that tops the business charts. She's writing a second book. She's inspiring millions. She's proving every single day that the method I mocked was actually the future, and the method I championed was already dying. And me? I'll keep training salespeople in the method she pioneered. I'll keep using my failure as a teaching tool, a cautionary tale, a reminder that ego is the enemy and humility is the path. I'll keep being the bad example that helps others become good leaders. It's not the legacy I wanted. It's not the story I thought I was writing. But it's the one I earned. And unlike Sarah, I can't turn my biggest failure into fuel. I can only own it, learn from it, and hope that somewhere, in some small way, my very public downfall helps someone else become a better leader than I ever was. That's all I have left. That's all I deserve. And somehow, in Sarah's grace and success and willingness to send me that kind note despite everything, even that feels like more than I earned, I destroyed her. And she became stronger. I built myself up. And I crumbled. That's the real lesson. That's the real story. That's what incapable really means when you think about it deeply enough to understand your own blindness. She was capable all along. I never was.